Hey everyone, I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited about today's guest. Most of you know that I worked in the addiction recovery field, so I definitely have a different view towards addicts and drugs in general. But today's guest, I was so pleased to meet because she taught me something that I had no idea existed, something that everyone should know about. So, without further ado, Kathi McCarty, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, Julianne. I'm excited and appreciative to be here today. Thank you.
So, I was so shocked when you were explaining to me a little bit about your story and what happened to you. And I would love for you to share a little bit with the audience about who you are and why you're so passionate about meth toxins and
Uh,
the awareness of, I should say.
right, right. I am the founder of Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance, and it launches, it's like you said, from my personal story. I had a serious health event in early 2016. And it took me away from my career in lending and banking. And afterwards, I decided to work on my next chapter and leverage my largest asset, which was my home in the foothills west of Denver in Evergreen, Colorado. And what I thought was a sensible solution by renting it out and putting all the right protections in place with insurance and a property management company, what ended up happening is within 90 days of them placing a tenant, I learned that that tenant had manufactured and consumed smoked methamphetamine in the home in our home that literally totaled it. So it put me on a, like you said, a passionate path to turn this mess into a mission, really to bring awareness and education about the insidious presence of meth toxins in our homes and other areas of our lives, and how truly dangerous it is to our health as well as to our finances. That's what brings me here today.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you here because and we'll dive deeper in a minute, but some of the stuff you shared with me was absolutely shocking. And, as somebody, like I said, who's worked in addiction recovery, I've seen how it can ravage a human body.
Right.
Oh my goodness, meth mouth where your teeth fall out, pox, from picking on your face and everything. I mean, shadow people. There's so many different things that happen to the person, but there's very little knowledge and very little out there about, you know, what it does to the environment. And what I mean by environment is your home, because it has to be made somewhere. It's not like it grows it's not like weed.
Right, right. Doesn't grow on
Doesn't
trees
grow on a
or
bush.
into trees.
So,
Yeah,
I would love for you to share a little bit about some of the things that you've discovered along, because you didn't ask for this. You thought you were doing everything right, and then you discovered a lot of things that were a little upsetting that you and I talked about. I'd love for you to share with the audience about that.
sure. Once I learned that my home was used as a meth lab, which was to give you a reference of time frame, it was October of 2018. It literally did put me on a path of 100 huge hurdles, especially the first 100 days. I had to learn what meth was, what goes into making it, and how it impacts our environment. Who can help me, as
Mhm.
well as uh, see if I could remediate it and take me on that trajectory. What I learned, my home was a 56 restored cabin, and so it's all wood, very porous, very little drywall, wood floors, wood beams, and all of that. And so it really did absorb the meth at levels that were significantly higher than our state here allows. And I found, after having several companies there, it could not be remediated to our standards here in the state of Colorado. What I also learned is that, as good as the Colorado state standards are, only half of our states even have any standards at all. So there's a whole approximately 25 other states that don't have any laws or regulations to even protect people relating to their environments within their homes, and then ultimately through a real estate transaction.
Exactly. So something you said, I found slightly disturbing, and I want to point it out, was that you said acceptable levels of meth.
Exactly.
Oh, it's okay to have some.
That's what I learned, and, like I mentioned, I was an affiliate in the real estate related industries as a lender and a banker for over 30 years, and even in a management position, I attended trainings, I hosted trainings, and yet I had never even heard that meth toxins was an issue in real estate, unlike mold and radon and asbestos and lead and all the other, there's plenty of other contaminants that we look for during a real estate transaction and trying to do our due diligence and doing inspections and things. What I found is that the states that do have regulations, there is a tolerance level acceptable for meth at all, right? And what I also learned, if you talk to the experts in testing and remediation, you can cut meth out to the the drywall, and you can take a property down to the studs. You can then encapsulate what's behind the walls and then rebuild it, things like that. But I haven't found anybody that can guarantee me 100% that all the meth toxins that are left behind from consumption as well as manufacturing are removed, unless you totally rebuild a property. And so that was disturbing for me because when I walked into my home after there had been a meth a raid, or I should say a search warrant for the tenant, the temporary tenant that was in there. I couldn't even be in my home for a minute without my eyes burning significantly. So I knew there was something going on really high, and then I had to obviously investigate how to learn how bad it was and if it could even be fixed.
Well, part of the reason too why I think it's so important that you're here today is because not all tenants are going to turn your house into a meth lab,
No.
but there's a higher probability of them smoking it
Right. Right.
in your home. And it's not like you can go out on well, I guess you could go out on the patio, but most people who are in the meth state of mind are extremely paranoid, so they're not going to do something like that anyway. I'm just curious, I mean, you mentioned like your eyes burning, but what are some other symptoms that maybe people would have from the exposure of being around that?
Exactly, and there's many a symptoms from a simple skin or slight eye irritation. Could feel like you have allergies,
Mhm.
burning in your nose, things like that, to something more significant by breathing it in. If you could have burning in your lungs, if you're like some of my family members who have asthma, it could really trigger some issues with asthma. To ultimately people that I've met that have had significant organ issues, toxicity in their liver and other areas of their body that can be actually very life threatening. And these are even adults. Most of the regulations and the measurements and regulations that I understand, though, are really geared around children, smaller body masses. So the smaller the body mass, possibly with the same exposure, you could have more significant impacts. Children have been known to have behavioral issues. Children and adults that I've talked to, well, adults of children as well as adults that I've spoken to, have had issues sleeping in environments that they learned that had meth in it. They had headaches, they had eye aches, all sorts of symptoms can come up depending, and it's made in very different ways, higher chemical concentrations depending upon who's making it, but ultimately, like you said, it is the more common occurrences from contamination in any kind of inside space is really from not the manufacturing, but the usage, whether it's recreational or from addiction.
I can't imagine a recreational meth user.
Yes, yeah, I've learned, and your pay grade was higher than obviously mine to have the training on it, because I understand you could use it a couple of times and really get uh,
Once, one
once,
time,
once,
and
right?
you are like, and I mean, extremely addictive. So, I mean,
Hmm.
this is like a little side note for people that are watching. something my dad said to me, which I thought was really fascinating. My dad is about to be 79, and he's never been drunk, and he's never been high. He's never done recreational drugs, nothing. And the reason why part of the reason why is because his parents were alcoholics, so that's why he didn't drink. But the reason why I never really tried drugs was because of a police officer that came to his school, and the police officer said, was talking about the evils of illicit drugs and things like that. But the thing that stuck with my dad was, you could try these things, but one, you could get addicted, and two, do you really want to know what you're missing? And I thought
Right.
that was a really brilliant way to speak to a child, because do you really want to know what you're missing? I have a friend that, she tried cocaine and she loved it so much. She was like, I could never touch that ever again, because that I will not come back from.
Right.
So I like this idea of, letting people know that about, yeah, it's bad for you. We all know. So smoking, so is alcohol, so is too much sugar, so sitting on your butt too long. That doesn't really deter us from necessarily trying things. But I don't know about you, but not that I would ever try meth. But just knowing that knowing what I would be missing is enough of a deterrent for me, so that I don't have to think about it, mentally obsess over something.
Exactly. And if you look at the ingredients that goes into meth, it's shocking that people will put that in their body. There's multiple ways to use it. When I grew up in Southern California in the late 70s and early 80s, it was around. People were snorting it. It
Yep.
wasn't. It wasn't. At least I didn't see any signs of smoking it. Although I learned later on in life that it can't. It was smoked. And then there's injecting it, and people are cross pollinating it with other drugs that are definitely making the headlines, like fentanyl and other things that are killing people. And so that's why those drugs are getting the headlines, where meth meth isn't getting the focus I believe it needs, like the opioid addiction as well as the fentanyl um, uh, tragedies that are going on right now, because people are being impacted, people are getting sick, people are
Mhm.
becoming houseless, like my situation and many others that I've met, but they're not dying at those same levels, so it's not getting the press that it deserves for prevention. And that's why we're here today. That's why I'm here today, is to bring this awareness and education, because I believe it's key to preventing it from happening. Because once you're jammed up in it, it's hard to it's impossible to get whole. It really is.
Yes. Simply yes. I want to acknowledge that. But something I was thinking about too is, you're talking about remediation and taking things down to the studs and all that, but how do you get rid of them? I mean, if you have to level that thing, it still doesn't go anywhere. Do you what happens to the materials?
Well, I didn't have the situation where I brought my property down, but I should have. In retrospect, it's the one thing that I wish I had done early on in that process. But what I learned is people try to remediate it, because one thing when you step into this is you'll find that 99.9% of the time in residential real estate, your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover it under your clauses of exclusion, which are contamination. And then I had this temporary tenant, and he did have a tenant's policy on the damage that could happen to my home, like accidents. A lot of insurance covers stupid, and I've witnessed that. But in this case, a tenant's policy also will not cover illegal activity. It's willful and wanton conduct. So they'll decline it based off of that. So, and it's not just one or two different carriers. I encourage people to check their policies and check with their carriers for specifics. But I haven't found any coverages under the commercial umbrella. There may be some ways to do it, but we'll go into later as to some of the prevention pieces that you can do. But the bottom line is that yeah, once you're jammed up in it, you're on your own for, can it be remediated? to a state standard, like you said, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gone.
Uh, yeah. I just find that so disturbing. It's like it's only a small amount of toxins. It's only they're still there. I mean, it's only a tiny bit of asbestos.
Right, right.
um, so you were mentioning too, I mean, when we come back from the commercial, we're going to talk a little bit about more about your story and how you sold your home and all of that and what happened and things to be aware of and how that brought you further down the pathway of what you're doing. But I'm
Hmm.
curious too, is are you focused mostly, I mean, only on meth toxins, or has your interest sort of grown from there?
Well, I've been introduced to a lot, and eventually I will continue to gravitate beyond meth contamination to other
Mhm,
areas that affect our homes, our properties, our temporary spaces, our vacation spaces, things like that, our vehicles. Meth toxins has been discovered in all of that, but gravitate to other areas. One in
mhm,
particular, since you mentioned it, we were talking about other drugs, is in this journey, I was introduced. I'm from Colorado here right now, and we were the first to legislate for cannabis, and there's,
mhm.
from what I understand, lots of positive uses, medical and otherwise, medical medicinal uses from cannabis. But what I also learned is that these high potency cannabis products are really dangerous to our youth, whose brains are still forming. And through this journey, I met a woman who lost her son to the high potency THC products are out there, and she started an organization called Johnny's Ambassadors. So, yes, I continue to champion this, but then as I meet amazing people with extraordinary stories, it helps widen my scope of where I want to continue to advocate on behalf of prevention for everybody on so many different areas. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that what you're doing isn't enough.
Right, right,
I'm
but
definitely not saying or implying that.
right,
I'm just curious because once you are giving of your time and energy and educating like the masses, all of a sudden other people come and they're like, you need to know about this too. And so that's why I was asking about that.
right,
I definitely
sure.
don't want to put down what you're doing in any way, shape,
No. Oh,
or
I didn't interpret that in any way at all, but it
form.
has opened my eyes, and I'm working on a magazine. It's called the Home Zone magazine, and so I see a lot of opportunity for, other topics and people talking about bringing their expertise in a lot of other areas.
Mm,
So it's very
I love
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. On that note, we do need to go to a commercial break, so we're going to be back in just a minute. And for those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Kathi about her specific experience and about how things for you as a consumer, as somebody who might be buying property, things that you should be aware of, because what she discovered through this whole process is really scary. We'll be back in just a minute.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching On Your Wellness, and today's amazing guest is Kathi McCarty. Welcome back to the show. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Julie, and nice to be here.
But right before the commercial break, I was mentioning that you had an experience, and I would love for you to share a little bit more about what happened with, I'm assuming this is your cabin.
This is our cabin. It's a 56 restored cabin, and it's just behind the sheriff's substation and the library in Evergreen, Colorado. You can literally see the sheriff cars, vehicles from my driveway.
That's a little scary thinking about that meth and those meth toxins being right there amongst, all these first line people and children. So, something that you had mentioned to me before, in our own private conversation was how you ended up selling um, your home. But I'm just curious what happened with that, because I think that
Sure.
this is really important that people know.
Sure. And it's an interesting story made strictly for prevention. That I do share it. So thank you for asking. Once I had several different remediation companies come to the home, they all were willing to try. You get paid, right, for giving it a try, but none of them did feel that they were going to be successful as much as they would be willing to try. And we're talking, bids that came into the $50,000 or more level.
Yes.
I even saw that the property management company got a bid, and what they wanted to do is encapsulate the meth in drywall and just build a shield around it, and I was supposed to live that way, and that alone was almost $120,000 bid. So people were looking for ways to for me to have it, to live in it, and I would have never felt comfortable after I learned that what can meth do. So anyways, I chose to sell it fully disclosed, fully contaminated, which is what is required here in my state. If it's not remediated to the state standard, like you said, put that in quotes.
Yeah.
And I figured a builder would buy it. It was a cute piece of land in the sense that that deck that of the picture that you showed, it faced west, and it was looking right at one of our 14ers out here, Mount Evans. So I had a beautiful view. It was close in. I figured a builder would buy it. I'd at least get out of my mortgage and then just move forward with my life. And what ended up happening is somebody purchased it that knew a lot about hazardous materials and knew that there was no guarantee that it could be remediated to the standard, but took a chance anyway. And when they weren't able to actually meet those standards, what they were able to do here in the state of Colorado is they were able to what's called encapsulate the meth. They basically sealed it in. And even the outside on that deck area, the eaves and the wall facing the west, that was all contaminated on the outside as well because the tenant was pumping. He had a machine inside, and he had a tube, and it was going out the window, and he was pumping the air outside, and it was contaminating even that front wall and those eaves. And so what the tenant did is they were able to encapsulate it with an approved process here in our state with a product that allows them to seal it in a clear coating. And then they were able to sell it 5.5 months after they bought it from me, after cleaning it up and probably they painted some cabinets, I could tell from the pictures, and it looked like they resanded the floors and probably put another coat of polyurethane, but not a whole lot else except for a remodel of the main bathroom. And then they sold it for hundreds of almost $300,000 more than they bought it from me 5.5 months later, and they were able to sell it undisclosed to that it had previous meth contamination.
Yeah, that's the part that bothers me, is that it was undisclosed. And I'm glad that you share that part of the story, because you don't know what you're buying. And so that's why it's super important. Now, I know that you have some education for people, and I'd love for you to talk a bit about that.
Sure. in this whole journey, that process pretty much shocked me, and I really wanted to build an education platform, especially for professionals who are in real estate related transactions. And it's the realtor themselves, as well as even property managers who here in Colorado are eligible for continuing education credits
Mhm.
under the Department of Regulatory Agency. It's called DORA, and in the Division of Real Estate, I've gotten an approved class. But I open it up to everybody who are affiliates, like inspectors, insurance, lenders, especially me coming from lending,
Mhm.
trusted advisors in so many related real estate related industries that could really take this information and be professionals and champions for safety beforehand. Because then I've also learned that the professionals are also really getting jammed up if a property is found to be meth contaminated afterwards. I've met people who have purchased properties and then had to move out and dealt with it on a large scale like myself.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty daunting process. It's, like I said before, not covered under insurance usually, most of the time, as and then even the professionals can find themselves getting involved in litigation over it, whether they even knew about meth at all or not. So
Yeah. So, as a business person, it's like, do you want to get jammed up in this, or do you want to walk in knowing that you're serving your clients in the best way possible? So, I
right.
think that alone makes it worth the time and energy. I mean, if you're not a humanitarian, and what I mean by that is you don't really necessarily care, but if you care about yourself, then at least, I'm just trying to get everybody to understand the importance of this.
Sure. And what I've also learned is that, people are just following the law. And so what
Yeah.
happened in my situation is that it I have my own personal opinion about the moral compass of following the law versus doing what's right. And in my
Yeah.
opinion, um, if it's so safe, then why is it such a big secret? Why not disclose it like you in many other states? And I'm not here to say that I'm an expert, but many other states, when you have a material defect of some sort, structural or contamination or otherwise, even if you've eradicated it or remediated it or whatever,
Mhm.
replaced it, you still may have to disclose it. So why is meth tolerated that it doesn't have to be disclosed if the process is so safe? And that's where the next piece for me is that I believe that everybody should test before they buy, because past doesn't mean gone. And the reason why past doesn't mean gone, and I'll use the wall behind me as an example, is the testing process is just subjective. They take a 4-inch square and they test a swab of a complete wall, and you might, depending upon the type of test that you get, you test a swab on each wall and then you average it in and you get a number, but you're not testing the whole wall. So if somebody even cleaned that wall to the standards of the state, it doesn't mean that more meth won't bleed through later on when you come around afterwards. It doesn't mean it won't surface later. If it's encapsulated, you put some nails on the wall with the pictures that you put up. It doesn't mean the seal isn't broken. They're doing their best to find ways to help in this process, but it's not perfect. And so
Mhm.
that's why, in my opinion, just test before you buy, because past doesn't necessarily mean it's fully gone. And even testing is not foolproof because it is subjective.
Well, something that you and I talked about before that, you sort of touched on is like this idea of disclosing things. And what I said to you was, I know at least in the state of New York, you're required to disclose if a house is haunted. Now, how does one decide if a house is haunted or not? First of all, this is something that can easily be quantified, and this is not necessary. I don't understand why this isn't, why the legislation doesn't catch up to what's going on.
I don't either. I've asked that of the leaders in real estate in our state here, at that level, and basically they said that meth uh, stigmatizes the property similar to a dead body, which makes no sense at all. Because it's handled like a dead body instead of like a toxin like asbestos, lead, mold, or radon.
Yeah, and I guess my problem with no matter what, whether you're going to call it a dead body or compare it to a dead body or
Hmm.
to another toxin is it is what it is.
Right, right, exactly.
If it stigmatizes it, then it does because it is what it is.
It is. And if it was fully cleaned and it was safe, again, why is it a secret? Then why not disclose it? Allow
Yeah.
people to do their research. If a property had been previously contaminated, they can measure their risk tolerance
Mhm.
versus not, and make an informed decision. Simple as that.
Well, that's the thing is you literally disclosed it and was able to sell it. So you can't tell me that it's an impossible task either. And
No. And
I.
but for me, I sold it and I lost all my equity. I was within single digits of paying my property off. I was looking at retirement in several years, and I basically got out of a mortgage, and that was it. And instead of looking at my next chapter with being mortgage free and even having my own home, it
Mhm,
puts you in a situation where I haven't been able at the same time this was going on in 2020 and whatnot. Real estate was at unprecedented levels. We were in the
mhm.
beginning of a pandemic, and real estate continued to jump. People were even waiving inspections and things like that. I mean, it was crazy unprecedented times in that type of a market, and it still is. And I wasn't able to go back in and purchase anything other than if I left the state, and my most of my kids and my family and my friends are here of almost 3 decades. So I wasn't willing to do that to start over somewhere else totally isolated from that. So it is definitely there's more to it than just the financial impact. The life changes that can go on,
Mhm.
can affect one's health as one is emotional well-being. I can't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to pop this up here. It's kind of hard to read the real
Hmm.
estate flyer, but I love this picture of you.
Uh, that was right before the very first time I had an opportunity, along with several other people like myself who had been impacted by meth toxins. We had some experts there, and our bill for prevention, our prevention bill in the 2023 legislative session here in Colorado, we got a chance to put something that we started with, and this is right before the very first time I was able to testify. So it's been a journey, but it's been a journey of many gifts along the way that I never thought I would have an opportunity. And so, yeah, that bottom right picture is some of us that were able to be there in person. We had others that showed up on Zoom due to scheduling issues, and several others that wrote in, experts and others wrote in about the need for legislation to require disclosure of meth toxins in a real estate transaction. And unfortunately, we weren't successful at getting that particular piece on the bill, but we did get some prevention started in the legislative session that was passed on June 2nd and signed by our governor, and it will go into effect. So I'm pretty proud of where it's a launching point. So
You got to start somewhere.
yes, yes,
As they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
right, right, right.
I've never really liked that example because I would never want to eat an elephant, but
Sometimes it comes up a little rough too. So
exactly. So
no,
I'm curious too, as I've popped up, your social media handle, but what can people find here?
I've tried to just build some posts and some testimonials on the class, some posts about what I've learned, quoted from experts in the industry, what I've learned along the way of my journey. One of the things, one of my most recent posts that I really started to think about, especially with some of the tragedies that drum up some responses from me when there's things like the fires that we had here in Colorado, the Marshall fires, the hurricanes all over. Is I've mentioned there's no insurance. I haven't found normal insurance for meth contamination due to the contaminant clause, but there's also no FEMA for meth. I mean, FEMA kicks in on large scale situations, maybe even smaller scale that we're not even aware of. But
Mhm.
there's absolutely no assistance. This particular situation that I ran through, that I endured with a tenant who was, by the way, arrested on 12 felony counts.
Wow.
12. He was looking at 32 years for what he was doing in my home, and yet this was a victimless crime. So the impacts that happen and the damage that's done on my property, to my property, is considered victimless. There's no crime because he had permission to be there. It wasn't vandalism. Would have been a whole different situation if he had broken into the property, like maybe when I was on vacation or something like that. But because he had permission to be there, it's considered a victimless crime because there was no bloodshed. Thank God. What he was doing in my home, he was making high potency THC products, which is why I was talking about that earlier. I didn't mention that, but that was the equipment that I found behind the home that led to me to go to the sheriff's substation where they got the search warrant, and then they found meth hardware for making meth, chemicals, and they found over 800 grams of meth and small arsenal of guns as well, and other drugs. So I implore you to, think about reaching out to me with your organization, professional or social, HOAs, things like that, whether you get CE credits or not, to become trusted advisors and to become better stewards of your own properties, whether it's your primary residence and you have family or friends that invite people over,
Mhm.
or you just never know who's doing meth. And it could
Yeah.
happen with, just like you said, at one time in one room, when you have family members visiting for the holidays, or you've
Mhm.
taken in a family member that maybe, had an addiction and is really trying to get themselves uh, back on their feet, and relapses. And then all of a sudden you find out that, your own home may or may not have been damaged in some way that you can't see, smell, feel, or any of
Yeah,
that. So,
exactly. Well, everyone, if you don't know, now you know.
and you don't know what you don't know, right? And so,
Exactly,
s-
exactly.
so it was really powerful for some of us to get up there in front of Senate and representative committees and have an opportunity to turn our lemons into legislation. That really was healing for some of us to, instead of really drumming up some really tough vibes, is really to do something positive from that for others moving forward.
I love that. On that note, it is time for us to go to another commercial break. We're going to be back in just a minute. And for everybody who's watching us on demand, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to dive into this idea of finding purpose from tragedy or, unfortunate circumstances, however you want to label these things, because I think that a lot of people are stuck in this idea that their purpose is their passion. And it's not, I don't know about you, but I highly doubt that Kathi feels very passionate in the positive sense about this, but except for what she is doing to help remediate the situation. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One day.
Trigger finger. It was getting a little long, and we're running low on time, so I wanted to bring Kathi back to the show. Welcome back. So, I touched on this briefly before we went to the commercial break, and it's this idea of, you found a purpose in this thing that is really, it should never have happened to you, and unfortunately it did. But you've created such, the education, just a place for people to really learn about what is possible, what has happened, and what you can do to protect yourself, and all these wonderful things. And I'm just curious, is this something that you see yourself doing indefinitely?
Absolutely. This isn't a job. This is soul work for me. This is healing, personally. But every time I reach out and connect with somebody that either had an eye-opening experience before they found themselves purchasing a property that they learned was contaminated from during an inspection that they did, to the people that have been impacted that I get to touch and help advocate with on behalf of their situation. It goes beyond the next chapter as far as a career. It's definitely leaving a hard print for me. Something I'll do forever.
I like that heart print. So the reason why I bring this up is, and I mentioned this before we went to commercial, is this idea, there's such a movement out there about how your purpose is your passion and all this. And there's just so many people out there that, myself included, like, my purpose wasn't what I would have picked for myself. I never would have picked my purpose consciously anyway.
Right.
But I like this idea of stepping into what life is put in front of you.
Right.
And I'm just curious what you would say. Do you think that people's purpose can change throughout their lifetime? Or do you think you just finally found it?
Well, absolutely. And I say that, I didn't find it. It obviously found me. And I look to the skies and I say, really, God? Really? Meth? That my four-letter word. But at the same time, I understand that I did have that serious health event. It affected my sight. I actually almost did lose my sight. I am nothing but grateful. With some grit and a lot of grace and nothing but gratitude. When I learned what was going on at my home, and how much explosive equipment and materials were going on behind the home,
Mhm.
as opposed to inside, and we had just uh, gotten out of a phase 2 fire ban in our area, that nobody else was impacted,
Mhm.
in my neighbors as well as my whole community. And that's where a lot of the gratitude is, and that I really knew that, people say, well, there's that house down the road or at the end of the cul-de-sac, or I pass it every day on the way to or from work, or my kids walk by it at school, and we really don't know what's going on, and we really should become more involved and stewards of our own safety and our own community and our loved ones, because things can go on behind four walls that really
Mhm.
do can impact us. So I really do know that this is a calling of a greater purpose, and I am grateful actually for the vision that I've had in the past to where I am now, in the vision that I'm stepping to in the near future to bring this on a much larger scale. What I've learned from the experts in law enforcement, the criminal justice process, the medical industry, social services is meth usage is at epidemic levels, not just locally, not even nationally, but globally. And so, this is good work to continue and bring prevention.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And I haven't worked in addiction recovery for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years now. But even back then, I mean, not that it was that long ago, but meth was huge. I mean, there were a lot of meth addicts that came through, and you'd be surprised at some of the people, the age of who they, you just never know, because people start off with other drugs sometimes, and then they graduate, as they say, to meth. So you just
Hmm.
never know. But something you said that I really want to kind of bring up and point out to people, and this is something that I teach a lot of my students, is the idea of accomplices. And because I'm trying to teach people how to change anything and transform their life in some way, but we have a lot of accomplices in our lives that keep us in the habits that we are accustomed to versus the ones we're trying to create. And one of those accomplices are the people who don't say anything. And, like you said, there's this house on at the end of the road, and nobody says anything. Everybody's hoping that somebody else will, or something will happen magically. Nobody says anything. But, I want to point out that if you choose not to say something, then you are an accomplice as well. So, and I know I've been guilty of it. This is not a blaming sort of thing. But the reason why I say this is because I want to give permission to the people out there who are afraid to, but want to say something.
Absolutely. That's what I felt I did when it came to the legislation piece. When I learned
Yes.
that my house could be sold and then not be disclosed, and
Hmm.
and I have to just be brutally honest and share that it was the same agent that did both. And the comment and the comment behind that is, I'm just following the law. I knew I had to work on getting that law changed then. I mean,
Hmm.
I didn't contact that person, or that's just the facts. That just is what happened. And so that's why I really wanted to, and I will continue to fight to change that law and bring more of this education to where, again, if it's so safe, then why is it such a secret? Why is money constantly the foundation for why we do or don't do something that we could or should? Is what I've learned is the root of that evil. And so yes, I applaud you for bringing that up and giving me a platform to have a voice, and be brave enough to say it out loud. and
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
what that's what I just need to keep doing. And it's been a tough journey up until this point. I can't pretend that it hasn't been easy, and I haven't felt the emotional impacts in the past. But I'm truly impassioned by the progress, and seeing how truly effective it is, and how some people have their own opinions. I respect their opinions, but I
Mhm.
will continue to champion you know, this movement.
Well, there's always going to be a naysayer.
Hmm.
There always will be. I don't care. You're not doing that big, you're not making that big of an impact if there isn't at least one naysayer. That's just how it is. I mean, especially in today's age. But
Hmm.
something else that I kind of wanted to point out was, this idea of, and I just recently went and saw Timber Hawkeye speak, and he was a monk, and he's just a really cool dude. And one of the things that he was talking about was, Do you put the shopping cart back in where it belongs after you're done shopping? If you grab something from the grocery store and you decide you don't want it, do you put it back where it belongs, or do you put it back somewhere else? And the point of him mentioning those two particular things is that it's not wrong. It's not against the law to do either thing, but you have a moral compass inside of you that is telling you what is right. And are you listening to that moral compass, or are you making excuses as to why you're not doing what you know in your heart is right?
Right.
And I just want to give people that permission. But we are almost out of time. So if there's any final thoughts that you'd love to share with the audience, now's your time to shine.
I appreciate that. I have a very loving mentor through this journey, and has always tried to help me hone in what's my one big message. And it's not really big, but it's empowering. And again, I've said it before, and I'll just repeat it: is just past does not mean that it's gone. So please invest in yourself, invest in your family, invest in your future by testing the property for meth before you buy it. You could save yourself a lot of heartache. That's all.
Well, that's the thing too, is I think that's the important thing. Let's talk about the feels. You can you can save yourself a lot of heartache.
Hmm. Right.
And sickness, illness, all this other stuff too. So something to keep in mind, everyone. Anyway, Kathi, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show. And thank you for sharing, because this is not well enough known. I didn't know, and I come from the world of drugs, so
Right.
I had no idea. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
The honor and the pleasure is all mine, and thank you for having me.
And everyone, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will be back again soon.